Here's the truth no narcissist wants you to hear. You don't defeat them by arguing, exposing, or proving anything. In fact, the moment you think you're winning, you're usually still trapped. The real defeat happens quietly, invisibly, and most people don't even realize it's already happened. Because when a narcissist truly loses you, they don't get closure, they don't get reactions, and they don't even get the satisfaction of knowing why they lost you. If this is resonating with you, take a moment to like this video and subscribe. Not for the algorithm, but as a quiet commitment to your own healing and clarity. True victory over a narcissist is internal, not external, because narcissistic dynamics are never actually about the arguments, the facts, or who is right. They are about control over your emotional state. As long as your sense of safety, worth, or clarity depends on their reactions, you are still engaged in the system they created. Many people believe winning looks like being understood, exposed, apologized to, or validated by others. But those outcomes still keep the narcissist at the center of the story. Internal victory happens when your emotional equilibrium no longer rises and falls based on their approval, rejection, or behavior. When this shift begins, you notice that the urgency to prove your experience fades. You no longer feel compelled to gather evidence, replay conversations, or convince anyone of what happened. This is not because the pain was imaginary, but because your nervous system has stopped seeking resolution from the person who caused the harm. A narcissist thrives on external engagement, even negative engagement, because attention confirms relevance. Internal victory removes that fuel source entirely. This kind of victory is quiet and often confusing at first. There is no dramatic moment where everything clicks. Instead, there is a gradual return to yourself. You start making decisions without mentally checking how they would respond. You feel less defensive, less hypervigilant, less preoccupied. Your body begins to relax in ways you may not have experienced in years. This is significant because narcissistic relationships condition the nervous system to stay in a state of alertness, constantly scanning for approval or danger. Internal victory also changes how you see the past. Instead of looping through self-blame or fantasy resolutions, you gain a grounded understanding of what was real and what was manipulation. This clarity is not emotionally charged, it is factual. You stop trying to extract meaning from their behavior and instead focus on your own patterns, needs, and boundaries. Responsibility shifts back to where it belongs, without cruelty and without self-abandonment. The most unsettling part of internal victory is that it does not feel like triumph. It feels like neutrality, like space, like your mind finally belongs to you again. There is no urge to announce it, no need to confront, no desire to watch them realize what they lost. Just the quiet experience of being present in your own life without their voice narrating your worth. Indifference hurts a narcissist more than confrontation because confrontation still signals emotional investment. When you argue, explain, defend yourself, or attempt to be understood, you are confirming that their opinions, reactions, and perceptions still matter to you. For a narcissist, this is not a loss, it is engagement. Even anger, frustration, or visible pain feeds their sense of significance. Indifference, on the other hand, removes the emotional feedback loop entirely. It communicates, without words, that they no longer occupy space in your internal world. This shift toward indifference is often misunderstood as avoidance or suppression, but it is neither true. Indifference emerges when your nervous system no longer registers them as a threat or a source of validation. Your body stops bracing for impact. You do not feel the surge of adrenaline when they reach out, criticize, or attempt to provoke you. This absence of reaction is deeply destabilizing for a narcissist because it disrupts the pattern they rely on to feel powerful and relevant. When indifference takes hold, you stop performing emotionally. You no longer explain your feelings, correct distortions, or chase resolution. Your responses become brief, neutral, or non-existent, not as a strategy, but as a natural outcome of emotional detachment. This creates a vacuum where their usual tactics fail. Provocation does not escalate, guilt does not land, charm does not hook. The narcissist senses this immediately, even if they cannot articulate it. This is why indifference often triggers escalated behavior at first. A narcissist may increase contact, shift narratives, or attempt to provoke stronger reactions because they feel the loss of control. But what they are reacting to is not hostility, it is absence. The absence of emotional supply, the absence of centrality, the absence of influence. Indifference is experienced as rejection at the deepest level because it signals irrelevance. For the person healing, indifference is not about winning or punishing. It is about reclaiming cognitive and emotional resources that were once consumed by vigilance and self-doubt. Your attention returns to your own life, your own rhythms, your own sense of meaning. The narcissist becomes background noise rather than a central figure. That shift is not loud or dramatic, but it is final, because without emotional access, the narcissistic dynamic cannot survive, and what remains is a quiet freedom that requires no explanation or acknowledgement to be real. Emotional detachment signals the collapse of a narcissist's control because narcissistic influence depends on emotional access. A narcissist does not dominate through logic or authority alone, but through the ability to activate your feelings on demand. When they can trigger fear, guilt, longing, shame, or hope, they maintain a line into your nervous system. Emotional detachment severs that line. It is not coldness or cruelty, but the absence of emotional reactivity that once made manipulation possible. In the early stages of narcissistic dynamics, your emotions are gradually trained to respond to them. Approval brings relief, disapproval brings anxiety, distance creates panic, and closeness creates hope. Over time, your emotional state becomes organized around their behavior. Detachment begins when this conditioning loosens. You no longer feel compelled to monitor their moods or anticipate their reactions. Their emotional shifts stop dictating your internal state. This is when control starts to fail. As detachment deepens, their attempts to influence you lose precision. Tactics that once worked feel transparent or strangely ineffective. Comments meant to provoke no longer land with the same intensity. Silent treatment no longer creates urgency. Displays of charm feel performative rather than magnetic. This is because emotional detachment restores your ability to observe instead of absorb. You see behavior without immediately personalizing it. For a narcissist, this is profoundly threatening. Control requires responsiveness. When you stop emotionally engaging, they lose their primary mechanism of influence. This often leads to confusion or escalation, not because you have done something wrong, but because the dynamic they relied on is no longer functioning. Emotional detachment removes the reward system that reinforced their behavior. From the inside, detachment feels like calm mixed with distance. You are present but not entangled. You can interact without losing yourself. You stop carrying the emotional labor of maintaining the connection. This frees cognitive space and emotional energy that had been consumed by self-doubt and hypervigilance. The most important aspect of emotional detachment is that it restores autonomy. Your feelings become your own again, guided by your values rather than their triggers. You are no longer emotionally available for manipulation, not because you are guarded, but because you are grounded. When emotional access is gone, control dissolves naturally, leaving behind a dynamic that cannot sustain itself because it no longer has a point of entry into your inner world. Boundaries are a form of silent power because they do not rely on persuasion, explanation, or emotional force to be effective. In narcissistic dynamics, power is often contested through words, reactions, and justifications. A narcissist expects engagement, expects negotiation, expects emotional leakage that can be exploited. Boundaries disrupt this expectation by operating without debate. They are enforced through behavior, not argument, and this is what makes them so powerful. When someone begins setting real boundaries, there is often a noticeable shift in how they move through interactions. They stop over-explaining their choices. They no longer apologize for their limits. They decide what they will and will not tolerate and act accordingly. This silence is not passive. It is deliberate self-containment. It signals that access is conditional, not guaranteed. For a narcissist who is accustomed to overriding limits through pressure or manipulation, this is deeply unsettling. Silent power emerges because boundaries remove the narcissist's usual points of leverage. Guilt stops working when you do not argue against it. Intimidation loses force when you calmly disengage. Emotional appeals fall flat when your actions remain consistent, regardless of the story being told. Boundaries communicate through consequence rather than confrontation. If a line is crossed, access is reduced. If respect is absent, presence is withdrawn. Nothing needs to be announced. This kind of power is especially effective because it does not invite counterattack. There is no statement to distort, no emotional display to weaponize, no justification to dismantle. The narcissist is left responding to reality rather than words. Over time, this teaches your nervous system that safety comes from consistency, not from managing someone else's emotions. For the person healing, boundaries also restore internal alignment. You begin to trust yourself because your actions match your values. There is less internal conflict, less rumination, less self-betrayal. You are no longer negotiating your worth in real time. This creates a grounded sense of authority that does not need validation. Silent power is not about dominance or control. It is about self-governance. When boundaries are clear and enforced without drama, the dynamic shifts. You are no longer reacting to the narcissist. You are responding to your own limits. That shift alone is enough to dismantle the imbalance that once allowed manipulation to thrive and replace it with a steady, self-directed presence that cannot be argued with or worn down. Healing rewires the nervous system a narcissist once exploited because narcissistic relationships are not maintained through logic, but through physiological conditioning. Over time, your body learns to associate certain emotional states with safety or danger based on the narcissist's behavior: inconsistent affection, sudden withdrawal, criticism followed by approval, all train your nervous system to stay alert, scanning for cues. You are not attached to the person so much as you are attached to the cycle. Healing begins when that conditioning is interrupted and slowly replaced with regulation and stability. During the relationship, your nervous system often exists in a state of heightened arousal. Anxiety, hope, fear, and relief cycle rapidly, keeping you emotionally invested and mentally preoccupied. This is why logic alone cannot free someone from the dynamic. The body has learned that unpredictability equals survival. When healing starts, it can feel uncomfortable because calm feels unfamiliar. Silence may feel empty. Consistency may feel boring. This does not mean something is wrong. It means your system is learning a new baseline. As healing progresses, your body stops interpreting the narcissist's behavior as a signal of threat or reward. Your heart rate does not spike at their messages. Your stomach does not drop when you imagine their disapproval. This is not indifference by force, but regulation by repetition. Each time you choose rest over rumination, clarity over chaos, and boundaries over appeasement, you are teaching your nervous system that safety comes from within, not from external validation. This rewiring is what ultimately makes the narcissist irrelevant. Without access to your stress response, they lose the ability to command your attention. Manipulation requires physiological hooks. When those hooks dissolve, their tactics feel flat and ineffective. You may intellectually understand what they are doing, but your body no longer reacts as if it is in danger. Healing also restores your capacity for discernment. You become more sensitive to your own signals rather than theirs. You notice when something feels off without immediately doubting yourself. You respond to discomfort early instead of overriding it. This is the opposite of how narcissistic conditioning operates. The most profound change is that your sense of self stabilizes. You are no longer defined by emotional highs and lows. Your identity is no longer shaped in reaction to someone else's moods. As the nervous system settles, your life expands. Peace stops feeling like an absence and starts feeling like presence. And once your body no longer recognizes the narcissistic pattern as familiar, it no longer feels like home, and the control they once had quietly disappears without needing confrontation or explanation. A narcissist loses influence when you stop explaining yourself because explanations are an open door to manipulation. In healthy relationships, explaining your feelings or decisions builds understanding. In narcissistic dynamics, explanations are collected, dissected, and weaponized. Every reason you give becomes a point of debate, distortion, or dismissal. When you explain yourself to a narcissist, you are unconsciously asking for permission to exist as you are. That request reinforces the power imbalance. Explaining keeps you engaged in their framework. It assumes they are a fair listener, that clarity will lead to respect, and that if you find the right words, the tension will resolve. But narcissists do not seek understanding, they seek leverage. They listen not to empathize, but to identify vulnerabilities. When you stop explaining, you remove the material they use to pull you back into confusion and self-doubt. The absence of explanation also shifts responsibility. You are no longer managing their emotions or anticipating their reactions. You make decisions based on your values and allow their response to belong to them. This is destabilizing for a narcissist because they rely on your emotional labor to regulate the interaction. Without your explanations, they are left facing a boundary they cannot negotiate. Stopping explanation often triggers discomfort in the person healing. There may be guilt, anxiety, or fear of being misunderstood. This is not because you are doing something wrong, but because you were conditioned to equate explanation with safety. Over time, as you hold your ground, your nervous system learns that you do not need approval to be secure. Silence becomes a form of self-respect rather than avoidance. When explanations end, interactions become simpler. You say no without justification. You disengage without defending your choice. You allow misunderstandings to exist without rushing to correct them. This is not cruelty or coldness. It is discernment. You recognize that clarity does not come from over-communication with someone invested in misunderstanding you. As this pattern settles, the narcissist's influence fades. They may accuse you of being distant, selfish, or changed. What they are